On this episode of The Lawyer You Know, we unpack the facts of the new documentary on Hulu, The Housewife and the Hustler. Hi, I'm Peter Tragos, host of the Lawyer You Know podcast and YouTube channel. The saying goes, everyone hates lawyers until you need one. Well, I'm here when you need one to answer your questions and give you insight that you didn't know you needed. Along with my partners, Pete Sardis, the professor, who has a finance and business background, and George Tragos, my dad, and the consigliere, a criminal defense giant, we can answer any questions you have. On this episode of The Lawyer You Know, we're unpacking the facts on the new Hulu documentary, The Housewife and the Hustler, which revolves around Erica Jane, who's a real housewife of somewhere in California, and her husband, Tom Girardi, who is a big shot personal injury lawyer, right? And I think that's the reason that some of the YouTube viewers sent this to me, is that her husband is a personal injury lawyer like me, and now they're in the news, and there are all sorts of legal aspects to this documentary, which follows along an epic downfall financially for this big shot personal injury lawyer and his flashy housewife, right? They are known for money. They are known for flash and flaunting it in your face with their 2 private planes, their mansion in Pasadena, their closet full of expensive shoes, purses, and clothes. They are known for being flashy with their money, right? So what is this documentary about, and what is the angle we're going to take in unpacking these facts is all of the legal troubles that now face her lawyer husband. What did he do, right? Let's start with that. Well, if you don't know who Tom Girardi is, he's the lawyer that handled the Aaron Brockovich case. He has handled some of the biggest injury cases in the nation's history. That was a $300+ million settlement. He's got tons of multi-million dollar settlements, tons of money made as a lawyer. So how did he get here? How did we start this documentary with a deposition of Tom Girardi saying, I had 50 or 80 or $100 million and now I'm broke. It's all gone. How did we get here? Well, it turns out there is some justice in the world, because scummy, shady, despicable personal injury lawyers that steal money from their clients end up broke, right? This is why personal injury lawyers get a bad name. This is why I have to fight against this stereotype when I'm in court picking juries. This is why normal people, lay people like you may be watching this video, hate personal injury lawyers. You hate the big ones. You hate the ones that advertise all the time. You hate the ones that seem like they have too much money, right? And this is why, because there are some personal injury lawyers out there like Tom Girardi. So what did he do and what do we know, right? The documentary follows a guy named Joe, who was a burn victim in California when a faulty pipe burst, burned down his house, burned his entire body, and his girlfriend died in this fire. It follows Joe, his family, his struggles, and his settlement. And they talk about how Tom was throughout the process, right? When we hired him, he was great. He was jovial. He was super nice. He talked to us all the time. He took us out to fancy dinners. He hired the mom's best friend to be a legal consultant at his firm. That's weird. Like, that's a red flag to me. I mean, it's not illegal, but that's a red flag to me, right? Then they go to mediation and he doesn't fully explain to them what's going on. He says, we're going to go to trial 1 minute. And then he walks in and says, I've settled the case. Didn't confirm it with them. That's not something lawyers are allowed to do. I did a whole video on mediation. If you're going to settle a case at mediation, the client is the boss. The Florida bar and the California State Bar, which we'll hear more from later, mandates that the client has to know and agree to any settlement. It's not up to the lawyer. We give our advice, and I have plenty of clients who say, whatever you think is best, I trust you. You've been through this process a lot more than me. Tell me what you think is a fair number, right? But we have that conversation with the clients, and we make sure the client is good with the settlement before we take it. Now, we hear that it was such a big number that Joe was fine with it. He was fine with the settlement amount. But then we hear Tom start talking about not giving Joe the money. And that'll raise red flags to a lot of people that don't understand the settlement process. There are tons of great lawyers and interesting cases that we've got to deal with. We just had one happen on a multi-million dollar lawsuit that you have to have what's called a guardian or a structured settlement. And what we do in those situations is we ask the court and we get a professional guardian, which is usually a lawyer that handles these cases, and they audit us and our actions as the personal injury lawyer. We are not the auditor. We are not the guardian. We do not control the money, and there's a reason for that, right? So this guardian looks into what we did, looks into the client's injuries. Is it fair? Did we do a good job, or does the lawyer need the money worse than the client? Because sometimes that happens. Because sometimes lawyers take out these huge loans at the beginning of the year to pay themselves so they can spend this money all year. which is what we hear Tom Girardi did in this documentary. He would take out these huge loans from banks to be flashy and pay for his planes, and then he'd have to pay them back. So they look into that and see if everything was done fair. We don't do that. So in this case, our guardian looked at everything, said, yes, very fair settlement, very fair amount that's going to go to the client. Let's talk about how to structure it, which brings us to the structured settlement, right? There are companies that do nothing but invest money for clients, right? You've got multi-million dollars. If in our case it was a kid, in some cases it's an adult. In this case it was an 18-year-old kid, whether that's an adult or a kid. But you don't want to just give an 18-year-old $12 million, right? That's not a great thing, which is what's happening in this case, and understandable, right? So you set up a payment plan. Sometimes it's they get $50,000 when they're 18, $250 when they're 21, $500 when they're 25, and then $100,000 payments for the rest of their life so they can make this money last because they need this money for surgeries. They got this money for pain and suffering, and because their life is going to be more difficult because of the negligence of somebody else. They don't just give you money in personal injury cases. The money that this guy Joe got was not just because he was a nice guy and they're like, here, go be rich and buy private planes. That's not why he got this money. He got this money, as you can see in the documentary, because he needs surgeries for the rest of his life because his burned skin gets tight and starts to hurt and starts to restrict his mobility. So he's going to have to continuously have these surgeries, and we meet his plastic surgeon and they talk about all the stuff that he's going to need to have done. That's why he needs this money, which is just so despicable and shows how greed and narcissism can get a hold of even people that may have been good at one point in their life. And Tom Girardi stole this money from him. It's insane to think about. I usually try to be understanding and I try to see it from both sides when I unpack the facts and these kind of things, but there's no way to see this from Tom Girardi's side. There's no way to see a guy that had that much money still needing to steal more. And my wife, who I watched this with, who watches some of the Housewives stuff, was like, I don't understand. If you had these, how much do you make on a $300 million settlement? 50, 60, 70 million dollars. How much do you make on a $50 million settlement? Why did he have to steal this money? He had so much money. But anybody who spends money knows if you spend more than you have, it doesn't matter how much money you make. If this guy had $100 million, but he was spending 150, he's broke. And if you have $50,000 and you're only spending 20, you've got enough money to live comfortably. So that's what it comes down to, right? And he had to feed this beast. He had to keep up with the Joneses. We saw interviews from other housewives and how they were so flashy. And he did it on camera. He bought these expensive paintings for millions of dollars and whatever it may be, right? And meanwhile, we see at the end that Joe doesn't have enough money to pay for his skin graft surgeries. So like I said, sometimes we involve these structured settlement companies. Sometimes there are funding companies, all sorts of different companies that are involved in the personal injury process, right? But what you don't want as a client is your lawyer, your personal injury lawyer, controlling all this. We know lawyers that are in the funding business, that are in the structured settlement business, and they're getting double dipping and triple dipping on this PI process, and they're getting money from all ends of the spectrum. They're loaning clients money. They're getting paid by clients. They're getting legal fees. They're getting structured settlement fees. And those are red flags because Tom Girardi was in control of Joe's entire settlement proceeds. They break down at one point in the documentary how the settlement funds work and how they go into our trust account and then how we get fees and what the client's money is. And the way it works is we get a big chunk. It's one settlement amount. It includes attorney's fees, costs, medical bills, pain and suffering, all the client's money. That goes into our trust account, which has our client's name. It is not our money as the lawyers. It is the client's money. Even our fees. It is the client's money and they are paying us fees that we've already agreed to, right? If they say, I'm not paying you fees, then we can go fight for those fees because we're entitled to them. But we don't control it. The client signs off on where the money goes. Then we, what we say, disperse the money for our fees to us and the client's money to them. Or if it's going to go in a structured settlement, we give it to the structured settlement company and they invest that money. But in this case, Tom Girardi told them that his firm would guarantee if they invested it with him that they would gain 5 or 6% over all this time, make money on their money, and he would guarantee that they wouldn't lose any money. He put that in an email and it was in the documentary. So his clients trusted him, which a lot of them do. If I told some of my clients, let me invest your money and I'll make sure you get more, by the time you've done a good job for them on their case and they trust you, they'd probably do it, which is why we're not allowed to do things like that as lawyers. Because clients trust us. They don't know how to handle these processes and they put so much trust in us. And that's important. It's something that we take very seriously. It's a sacred trust. So when you take advantage of it, it's just all the worse. And because he was so flashy and flaunting all this money, when Joe noticed that some of the checks weren't coming to him, Tom was in control of paying Joe every week or month or whatever it was. And the money would stop and he would email Tom and Tom would disappear. And he wouldn't answer any calls, yet his wife's still on Real Housewives. They're still spending a ton of money. And one of the lawyers that was interviewed in the documentary had one of my favorite parts where he said, we represent the little guy. We as personal injury lawyers represent the victims who have been wronged by these big companies, these rich insurance companies, and these wealthy men and corporations. The man, that's who we sue. We as personal injury lawyers don't want to become the man. And what he means is not making a lot of money, right? Lawyers can make a lot of money if they do a good job. He means the man doesn't care about anybody else. They don't care about the little guy. They'll step on anyone for the mighty dollar. They care about greed. They care about the bottom line. They care about the mighty dollar. That's all they care about. They don't care about people's well-being or people's lives or the surgeries people need. And that's when Tom Girardi became the man, right? That's what he meant. And I that hit because it's like, yeah, we're fighting against this. We don't want to become this. We don't want to become profits over people, which is what it seems like Tom Girardi's becoming. And that's a slogan used in tons of personal injury cases, especially class action cases against these huge companies who don't care about the health and safety problems that their product may have. They care about the money. They'll pay off the people that get hurt. That's the man. So what happens to Tom Girardi now that these clients know he's stealing their money? And there were other cases besides Joe. There was a products liability case where she got a $135,000 settlement. And guess how much she saw out of that? Zip. Nothing. So she made a bar complaint saying, he told me he didn't get the money. And he said he was waiting for his money as much as she was. Yet she has proof that the insurance company wired the money to Girardi's law firm. Yet she never saw it. Then there was another huge case with the plane crash victims who died in this plane crash, and Tom Girardi got huge multi-million dollars worth of settlements, and those victims never got the money. So what happens? What can these victims do? Well, you'll also hear throughout the documentary that Tom Girardi is a very influential person. He helps pick judges, which we did an entire video on the Judicial Nominating Committee and how lawyers are involved in that process, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But he seemed to have more control over them because at parties, when he would do this to judges, they would come running like puppy dogs. He had political influence. Gavin Newsom went on Watch What Happens Live, which is a show connected with the Real Housewives on Bravo, and said, "Ooh, I love Tom Girardi. He's a huge donor. He's very influential and powerful. We really like him," with a big smirk on his face. So he had influence. He had influence in law enforcement, they said. So they were scared. They didn't know. None of the lawyers wanted to step on Tom's toes. He was that big of a legal giant. So they had trouble finding somebody that would file this claim for them. So what did they do? Finally, they get lawyers that would. Some lawyers in Chicago, some lawyers in LA that filed a lawsuit. They end up going forward and getting a judgment against Tom Girardi for $12 million that he has to pay Joe in installments, starting with $1 million, then $2 million. Just think about how big that confidential settlement must have been for Joe. To after have already gotten paid some of the money, after the attorney's fees, after the costs, after the medical bills were paid, he still, years later, was owed $12 million as part of this settlement. Well, what do you think happened? Tom made the first payment of $1 million and then stopped making all payments. So now Tom's been forced into involuntary bankruptcy, which means they can liquidate his assets. They can sell his private planes. They can sell the stuff they saw on the Real Housewives in their closet. They can sell this Pasadena mansion. But they say he's still living in that Pasadena mansion, which is hard for some people to believe. When you're liquidating assets, you can't just sell it for whatever anybody offers to make sure you get the money as quick as you can. There's a balancing act that the judge, the guardians, the bankruptcy courts, everybody tries to do so that they get enough money to pay off all the creditors while they're liquidating these assets. So while it may seem preposterous to many, including me, that he's still living in this huge mansion, living large, they have to balance and get as much money as they can for his assets, for his 2 private planes, for his Pasadena mansion, for everything in the closet that we see on Bravo. They have to get as much as they can so they can pay the creditors off. The next step of what can happen to him past bankruptcy is a conservatorship. He's actually ruled to be incompetent and not mentally competent enough to handle his own finances. So I think it's his brother that is his conservator. And we did a whole podcast on Britney Spears and that conservatorship, so you can check that out if you want to know more about conservatorships. But now he's also been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Okay, and there's a lot of reasons people are kind of questioning this, questioning his competency issues and questioning kind of what he's doing now, because he's trying to affect these bankruptcy proceedings. He's trying to affect what's happening to him and everybody suing him, and that he didn't know maybe what was going on while he was accidentally stealing money from his clients. But one of the lawyers who was interviewed throughout the documentary said, I was with him before the pandemic hit. He was speaking at events. He was talking to people. He seemed perfectly fine to me. So I don't know what happened over the last few months, but now all of a sudden he's got Alzheimer's and he's incompetent. I'm not buying it, because these competency issues could become important in a couple other things that may be coming for Mr. Girardi, right? First being the divorce. Erika Jayne has filed for divorce. It's being covered on the Bravo TV show because, of course, she's still on that and they don't want to miss all this drama. So that's something that could come into play with that, as well as potential criminal charges. So in the documentary, they talk about the fact that they are investigating him and that there will probably be criminal charges coming for Tom Girardi. But they're usually not going to throw an old man with Alzheimer's who's incompetent in prison. It'll probably drag out and he'll just be on house arrest or something like that. He'll get some kind of slap on the wrist and it won't be as bad as it would be for somebody who was in their prime and competent and didn't have Alzheimer's. So that may be a strategic move for Tom to try to avoid as severe of a penalty as he deserves. And near the end of the documentary, they talk about the last potential consequence that could be coming Tom Girardi's way, and that is disbarment and sanctions from the California bar. Every state has a bar, like the Florida bar, the California state bar, that governs lawyers, polices lawyers, tells us what we can and can't do. They can take away our license. They can take away our ability to practice law. They can take away our income. They can take away the way we make money and our jobs that we do every single day. They have the power to do that. We submit to that authority as lawyers in that state. And they're coming out and saying, as you would expect, that over these 40 years, like we documented 3 in this documentary, over the 40 years, there have been plenty of complaints made about Tom Girardi. So how did it get this far? How did it get this bad? Well, it turns out the California bar is actually admitting to mishandling some of the prior complaints against Girardi, and they're doing an investigation, and right now they are looking to disbar him. It's been stayed by the court, probably because of his competency issues, but they are now looking to disbar him and admit they've screwed up in the past with some of these complaints. Why is that? Do you think there is some merit to the fact that he had too much influence, too much power, too much money, that the entire state bar was too afraid to go after him and step on his toes, like was said in the documentary? One lawyer, one company should not get so big that the governing authorities are actually scared to do their job and make sure that they're protecting the clients and protecting the people that these big companies or that the man, like Tom Girardi, is screwing. Right? But that's what it looks like happened in the past. And it's horrible. I mean, the lawyer that's getting interviewed throughout also says a day late and $1 short when it comes to the bar actually taking action against Tom Girardi. It's too late. He's already spent his client's money. So that leads us into what happens to the clients. So they've sued him. They even have judgments against him. They get to take depositions now about his assets, about his liquidity, about how much money he has. And that's where in the documentary, one of the, I don't know if it's sad or shocking or what, it's definitely not as sad as what's happening to these victims, but Tom Girardi says, I once had 50, 80, $100 million in cash and investments, and now it's all gone. Basically, I am broke. Okay, so that's what he says in a deposition recorded for everyone to know and everyone to see in this documentary, that one guy that used to live as large as anyone is now literally broke and forced into involuntary bankruptcy. So while, none of us are crying for him, the fact that he doesn't have any money does hurt these clients that he owes money to. So what happens? During this involuntary bankruptcy process, there is a line around the corner of people that are creditors, meaning Tom Girardi owes a ton of people money. At the end of the documentary, it did say that these clients are at the front of the line for people that are going to get paid once they liquidate all of Tom Girardi's assets and once they get a hold of the money that his estate still has. So all of his possessions get sold, he gets that money. These clients should be some of the first people in line to collect that money. So we hope that's true, and we'll follow up and try to see if we can find out if they do collect throughout his bankruptcy process. Lastly, right, we didn't focus much on Erika Jayne throughout this because it was much more interesting to me that a personal injury lawyer could be this scummy and shady and end up in this situation and have this, epic rise and then epic downfall to now getting what he deserves if he stole money from his clients. But Erika Jayne is kind of intertwined throughout this process, right? She's still living large. She's still on the Housewives. She's still showing how much money she's spending on her glam squad. How does this affect her, right? Is she intertwined in this? Did she know that he was stealing money from his clients? Could she be an accessory to these criminal crimes committed by Tom Girardi? Well, it's not unusual for wives to not know what's going on in their husband's business affairs. You look at Bernie Madoff and it looks like his wife didn't know what was going on. They don't ask questions. They just want to spend the money, right? That's basically what the Housewives show is about. They just spend their husband's money, which is why they're the real housewives, right? That was the concept of the show. So I don't think it's unfathomable that she didn't know what was going on as far as his criminal activity, stealing money from clients. But there was some inferences in the documentary that some of these loans he got from banks was to pay for her pop star career and was to keep up her glam squad to be on The Real Housewives so that she could make money investing in her businesses, basically. And if they can prove that those loans did go to that money, she could be on the hook to pay back some of those loans. Additionally, in these divorce proceedings, a guy in the documentary said, if you would have asked me what happened when they got divorced, because there was no prenup, I would have told you Tom was going to be giving Erica a lot of money. Now it looks like that might be reversed because she's making more money than him, which seemed impossible at the time that they got married. She is also dodging subpoenas and not showing up to court, even though she's being mandated to do so. So we'll have to follow that and see what her lawyers are going to do to fight that. And speaking of her lawyers, they have since dropped her as a client since this documentary came out. Now, it could just be coincidence because it was almost the same day the documentary dropped, or they could have seen something in that documentary that made them think, we don't want to be involved in this. We don't want to represent her in any facet in this case. You better make sure you get an attorney. We're cautioning you from waiting too long. It could have a detrimental effect on your case if you don't get another attorney quickly. That's just something lawyers put in disengagement letters when we drop a client or fire a client, as some people say. We put that in there to protect us, to make sure they know they need to go get another lawyer. There could be a statute of limitations. There could be a timing issue, so go get a lawyer as soon as possible. It also makes it easier on us. Once they get a new lawyer, we don't have to worry about the fact that we dropped the case and therefore maybe there's going to be a statute of limitations issue, right? So that's common language in all letters that are sent to clients once they're dropped from a law firm. So I wouldn't read anything too much into that. But they did drop her. I'm sure she won't have a problem finding other lawyers looking for publicity and looking for probably the money that she can spend on them. I'm sure she'll have another lawyer soon, so we don't have to worry about her. But is she intertwined in this? Do you think she knew? Let me know in the comments. Let me know what you think should happen to her. Let me know what you think fair punishment should be for Tom Girardi in this situation, doing about as despicable of a thing as you could, taking advantage of these victims who look to you with trust in their times of need and the worst times of their life. One of the ladies hired him in this situation when her son died in a motorcycle accident. Like, can you think of anything worse? And what does Tom Girardi decide to do? Steal money from them. If it's true, this is the worst possible thing you can do. And he deserves everything that's coming to him. So we'll keep following this and see what happens to Tom Girardi and see what happens to Erika Jayne. Let me know if you see anything in the news and current events and sports and reality TV that crosses over and collides with the law that you want me to unpack the facts on. I'm happy to do it. That's how we get a lot of our content. We love hearing it from you guys. Thanks for listening this week, and we'll be with you next time. Thanks for watching this episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you like this content, please share it with your friends. Make sure you subscribe to our page and like our videos. If you want some interaction, get in the comments and we'll be sure to get back to you. If you want to know any more information about our firm or this page, you can find out in the description or visit tragoslaw.com. We post multiple times throughout the week, so make sure you hit that bell so you can get the notification and not miss out on the next episode.